The email came at 11:47 on a Friday night, and I almost didn't open it. I was already in bed, still in my work clothes because I'd fallen asleep grading papers. My laptop balanced on my knees and a half-eaten bowl of cereal on the nightstand. I was a high school English teacher in Portland, Oregon. I was 31 years old. I had $4,200 in my savings account and a car with 140,000 miles on it, and I thought those were my biggest financial problems. The subject line read, Noticed of delinquency, AC count Eendens 1741, I mediate respartsvens required. I opened it because I thought it was spam. I almost deleted it because the lender name meant nothing to me. Coastal Ridge Capital Group. I'd never borrowed money from anyone called Coastal Ridge Capital Group. I had a student loan from my federal servicer, a credit card with a $2,000 limit, and a car payment. That was the entire map of my financial life. But my name was in the body of the email, my full legal name, and so was my social security number, last 4 digits visible. And the amount listed as past due was $215,000. I sat up so fast the cereal bowl hit the floor. I read it again and again. A personal guarantee, a small business loan, a bakery called Sunrise and Bloom LLC, registered in Multnomah County, Oregon. And my name right there in black and white, listed as the personal guarantor on a debt I had never agreed to, for a business I had never heard of, for money I had never touched. Have you ever had that feeling where the world doesn't tilt? It just goes completely still? Like everything gets very quiet and very sharp at the same time? That's what happened to me. I wasn't panicking. I was calculating. Because somewhere underneath the shock, I already knew. I didn't know the details. But I knew the shape of it. I had known the shape of it my whole life. My mother has always been the kind of woman who fills a room. Not in the warm way. In the way that makes you adjust yourself before she arrives. She's generous with her opinions and stingy with her apologies, and she has spent the better part of her adult life performing the role of a woman who has sacrificed everything for her children. She is very good at the performance. She has fooled a lot of people. She fooled me for a long time. My younger sister has always been her favorite. That's not bitterness. It's just a fact I accepted a long time ago. The way you accept that it rains a lot in Portland. My sister is charming and pretty, and she has a way of crying that makes people want to hand her things. She has been engaged twice, and neither engagement ended in a wedding, but both ended with her keeping the ring. She has worked approximately 4 jobs in the last 6 years, each one abandoned after a few months for reasons that were always someone else's fault. And yet, every time there was a crisis, my phone rang. Not my sister's, mine. I was the one who sent $3,000 when my mother said the water heater burst. I was the one who co-signed, or thought I co-signed, a lease for my sister's apartment 2 years ago when her credit was, and I'm quoting my mother here, going through a rough patch. I was the one who drove 4 hours round trip to help my mother move furniture, help my sister fill out paperwork. Help, help, help. While my sister posted photos of brunch on Instagram, and my mother told her book club what a devoted daughter she was. I had always told myself it was love. That's what you tell yourself. I was staring at that email and I understood, for the first time, with the cold clarity that only comes at midnight when the performance is finally over, that it had never been love. It had been access. I was not their family. I was their infrastructure. I didn't sleep that night. I made a list, every payment I could remember, every loan that was never repaid, every emergency that turned out not to be one. I filled 3 pages of a legal pad and I had to stop because my hand was cramping and because the total I was looking at made me feel physically sick. At 7 in the morning, I called my cousin. My cousin is not a lawyer. She's a project manager at a tech firm in Seattle, and she has the kind of mind that treats every problem like a workflow to be optimized. She is also the only person in my extended family who has ever told me plainly, without softening it, that my mother and my sister were taking advantage of me. She told me that at Thanksgiving 4 years ago, and I didn't speak to her for 6 months. She was right, and I wasn't ready to hear it, and she was patient enough to wait. She picked up on the first ring. I read her the email. There was a long pause. "Don't call your mother," she said. "Don't call your sister. Don't respond to that email. Call a lawyer this morning. I don't have a lawyer. You're going to need one, she said. A real one. Not a family friend. Someone who does business litigation and doesn't know your mom. I found one through the Oregon State Bar Referral Service. Her name was Patricia, and she had 17 years of experience in commercial fraud and contract disputes. And when I explained the situation in her office that afternoon, still in my Friday clothes, still not having slept, she didn't react with surprise. She reacted with focus. She took the printed email. She asked me a series of questions, each one more specific than the last. Had I ever signed anything for a business called Sunrise and Bloom? No. Had I provided my social security number to my mother or sister for any purpose in the last 3 years? I had, for the lease cosign. Had I reviewed the lease documents before signing? I had signed what my mother emailed me and returned it the same day because she said it was urgent. Had I kept a copy? I had not. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Here's what I think happened, she said. Someone used your identifying information, almost certainly obtained through that lease, to forge your signature on a personal guarantee for a business loan. The business has defaulted. The lender is coming after the guarantor. That's you, on paper. My mouth went dry. Can they do that? Can they actually come after me? If the forgery holds up as real, yes. A personal guarantee makes you personally liable. They can come after your wages, your bank accounts, your assets. She paused. You're a teacher? Yes. Oregon has some wage garnishment protections for public employees, but that doesn't mean this isn't serious. A judgment of this size would appear on your credit for years. It could affect your ability to rent, to get a car loan, to eventually buy a home. She set down her pen. And there is one more thing. If a court finds that you signed this guarantee and then defaulted, your teaching license could theoretically be subject to a fitness review. My teaching license. The one thing I had built by myself. 4 years of college, 2 years of graduate school, 6 years in the classroom. The one thing no one had ever asked me to fund or fix or carry for them. I felt the last remaining warmth I had from my family leave my body like water going down a drain. What do I do first? I asked. We file an emergency motion to dispute the guarantee, she said. We request a forensic handwriting analysis on that signature. We send a cease and desist to the lender. And we freeze your credit immediately, all 3 bureaus, so no one can open anything else in your name. She looked at me steadily. And then we start pulling on threads. Because in my experience, a forgery this clean doesn't happen by accident. Someone knew what they were doing, and I'd like to know who helped them. That last sentence stayed with me on the drive home. Who helped them? Because here's the thing. My mother has many qualities, but she is not technically sophisticated. She struggles to attach PDFs to emails. She has called me to help her reset her own Wi-Fi password more than once. Forging a signature on a commercial loan guarantee, navigating the application process for $215,000, registering an LLC that was not my mother operating alone. I thought about my sister. I thought about her 4 jobs, her 2 failed engagements, her brunch photos. No. My sister is impulsive, not strategic. She would have told someone. She would have bragged. So who? The answer came from Patricia 3 days later, and it was not one I was prepared for. She called me on a Tuesday afternoon while I was sitting in my car in the school parking lot, eating a granola bar and pretending my life was not collapsing. I've been doing some background work on Sunrise and Bloom, she said. The LLC was registered 8 months ago. The registered agent is a business formation service, so that's a dead end. But the initial capital deposit for the business account, the seed money before the loan, was wired from an LLC called Hargrove Consulting. Hargrove. That was my father's last name. My father, who had left when I was 9 years old and whom I had not spoken to in over a decade. My father, who existed in our family narrative as a cautionary tale my mother told whenever she needed to remind us how much she had sacrificed. He was irresponsible. He was selfish. He had abandoned us and never looked back. Is there a person attached to that LLC? I asked. My voice was very calm. I was using the voice I use when a student is in crisis and I cannot afford to let my own reaction take up space. The registered agent is a man named, she paused. Gerald Hargrove. I closed my eyes. He's in Portland, Patricia said. Has been for at least the past 2 years, based on the business registration address, and he's requested a meeting. Through me. He contacted my office this morning. A beat. He says he has documentation you need to see. I sat in my car for 20 minutes after I hung up. I watched a group of my students walk to the bus stop, laughing about something, backpacks bouncing, the whole beautiful, uncomplicated ease of 17. I thought about the version of myself at 17, working a part-time job at a coffee shop so I could buy my own school supplies because my mother had borrowed the money I'd been saving. I thought about how long I had been doing this, how young it had started. Then I drove to my cousin's apartment and told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love most about her. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Are you going to meet him?" she asked. "I don't know." "Yes, you do," she said, not unkindly. She was right. I already knew. Because something in the shape of the story had shifted, the way a room shifts when you turn on a light and you realize the furniture is not arranged the way you remembered. My father, present in Portland for 2 years, attached to the money that launched the business that was now destroying my credit. It wasn't an accident. None of it was an accident. I met him at Patricia's office on a Thursday morning. I arrived early and sat with my back to the wall so I could see the door. He was older than I expected, even though I don't know why I was surprised. He would be 63 now. He looked like someone who had learned to carry weight quietly, not heavy exactly, but settled. He was wearing a gray sport coat and he was carrying a manila folder, and when he saw me, he stopped in the doorway for a moment. "You look like your grandmother," he said, her eyes. I didn't say anything. I didn't trust myself to start with small talk. He sat down. Patricia was there across the table and she nodded at him to begin. He opened the folder. What came out over the next 90 minutes rearranged everything I thought I knew about my own life. He had not abandoned us. He had been pushed out. When my parents divorced, my mother had told him that if he attempted to pursue shared custody, she would accuse him of things that would end his career. He was a teacher too. Middle school science, 22 years. He had believed her. He had taken a settlement that included giving up almost everything, including regular contact with me, because he was terrified of what she would say and who would believe it. He had moved away. He had spent years in a kind of suspended grief, watching from a distance, sending birthday cards that he later learned my mother never passed along. He had moved back to Portland 2 years ago because my grandmother, his mother, a woman I had met exactly twice, was dying. And while he was here, sorting through her estate, he had discovered something. My grandmother had set up a trust when I was born, not for my sister. For me specifically, by name. It was modest, about $60,000 in index funds that had been growing for 30 years. It was meant to be released to me at 30, which I had turned 8 months ago. My grandmother had tried to notify me directly, but the address she had was an old one. She had then contacted my mother as a secondary point of contact. My mother had responded on my behalf. She had sent documents claiming to represent my interests. She had redirected the trust funds into a new account. And then she and my sister had used those funds, along with the forged loan guarantee, to launch Sunrise and Bloom, a bakery that had never baked a single thing because it was never meant to. I stared at the folder in front of me. There were bank statements, there were emails. There was a copy of the original trust document with my grandmother's signature on it, and next to it a copy of the authorization my mother had submitted, and I did not need a handwriting expert to see the difference. "Why didn't you come to me directly?" I asked him. My voice was steady. Surgeon steady, my cousin would say later when I told her. "Why contact my lawyer first?" He looked at his hands. "Because I wasn't sure you'd see me," he said. "And because I wanted you to have the documentation in a safe place before your mother found out I was involved." He paused. "I know I don't have the right to protect you. I lost that a long time ago, and that's on me. But I could do this, so I did." I didn't forgive him in that room. I want to be honest about that. Forgiveness is not something that happens in a conference room on a Thursday morning. But I looked at him and I saw something I hadn't been prepared to see. Not a villain. Not the cautionary tale my mother had been telling for 22 years. just a person who had made a terrible calculation a long time ago and had been living in the wreckage of it. Same as me, in a different way. Okay, I said. What do we do now? Patricia was ready. She had been ready, I think, from the moment she first heard the name Hargrove Consulting. The motion to void the personal guarantee was filed that afternoon, supported by a forensic handwriting analysis that Patricia had fast-tracked through a certified document examiner. The forged signature didn't just look different from mine, it was structurally inconsistent, the pen pressure wrong. The letter formation reversed in 2 places. The examiner had seen it in 10 minutes. The credit freeze was already in place. Now Patricia added a civil complaint for fraud against both my mother and my sister, naming specific accounts, specific transfers, specific dates. She attached the trust documentation. She attached the bank records. She attached the emails my mother had sent to the trust administrator impersonating me. And then there was the matter of what my father brought in addition to the folder. He had spent 2 years quietly documenting. He had not known about the loan guarantee, that was a newer development, but he had known something was wrong with the trust disbursement, and he had been tracking it. He had records of withdrawals. He had records of transfers into the Sunrise and Bloom business account. He had a voicemail saved, time-stamped, in which my sister called him, not knowing who he was, asking if Hargrove Consulting was interested in investing in the bakery. She had found his business name in the trust paperwork and cold called him. She had no idea she was talking to her own father. He had recorded the call. Oregon is a 2-party consent state for recordings, but Patricia said it didn't matter. We had more than enough without it. The cease and desist to Coastal Ridge Capital Group landed with enough documentation to make them pause. They had been pursuing me as the guarantor in good faith, they said, but when presented with the forensic analysis and the fraud complaint, they agreed to hold the collection action pending the outcome of the civil case. My name was, for the moment, safe. It was my cousin who suggested I call my mother first, before the summons arrived. Not to give her a warning, but to give myself the experience of saying it to her face before everything became lawyers and courtrooms. You don't have to, my cousin said, but I think you might want to. She was right, again. My mother called me the next morning before I could call her. She had heard something, I don't know what. Maybe from my sister, maybe a rumor, maybe instinct. Her voice when I answered was the voice she uses when she is positioning herself as the wounded party before she's been accused of anything. I don't know what you think is happening, she said, but someone is filling your head with lies, and I need you to stop whatever you've started before this gets out of hand. Mom, I said, you have no idea what I've been through. Keeping this family together after your father left, everything I gave up, every sacrifice. Mom. She stopped. I know about Grandma's trust, I said. I know about the authorization letters you sent. I know about the Sunrise and Bloom account. I know about all of it. Silence. The particular silence of someone recalibrating. That is, she started. You have to understand, we needed. You forged my signature on a $215,000 loan guarantee, I said. You intercepted money my grandmother left specifically for me. You used my identity to cover a debt that was never mine. I paused. And Dad didn't abandon us. You pushed him out and told me a story for 22 years. The silence this time was different, heavier. He told you that. Her voice had gone flat. He's been poisoning you. He brought me documents, I said. He brought me the trust paperwork. He brought bank records. He brought my grandmother's original instructions. I took a breath. The documents aren't poisoning me. They're just true. She shifted. She always shifts, from wounded to righteous, from righteous to pleading. Each persona a costume she changes into when the last one stops working. I had watched her do it my whole life. I had always waited for her to find the right one, and then I had responded to it like it was real. Sweetheart. Her voice went soft. You are my daughter. Whatever mistakes were made, we are family. Family doesn't do this to each other. I didn't do anything to you, I said. I just stopped letting you do it to me. I heard her inhale sharply. The summons will arrive this week, I said. I'd recommend you get a lawyer. I hung up. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time afterward. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel relieved. I felt the particular exhaustion of someone who has been carrying something for so long, but putting it down doesn't feel like freedom yet. It just feels like the absence of weight, which is its own strange disorientation. My sister called 4 times that afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. The messages escalated in a predictable arc: confused, then hurt, then accusing, then bargaining. The last one was tearful. She said she hadn't known it would go this far. She said our mother had told her it was fine, that I'd agreed, that I was just upset about the paperwork. She said she was sorry. I believed her a little. My sister is many things, but she is also, underneath everything, someone who has spent her whole life being told by our mother that someone else will handle it. That's its own kind of damage. I couldn't carry her damage anymore, but I could acknowledge it existed. I didn't call her back. The hearing was not a trial in the way you see on television. There was no jury. It was a civil proceeding before a judge, and my mother and sister arrived with a lawyer who looked deeply underprepared. He argued family misunderstanding. He argued that my mother had acted in good faith, that she believed she had implied authorization, that the trust funds had been used in my interests even if the paperwork was imperfect. Patricia stood up and placed Exhibit A on the screen, the forged signature alongside my real one, with a forensic examiner's report annotating 16 specific inconsistencies. Then Exhibit B, the trust document, my grandmother's original instructions naming me by name, and the fraudulent authorization letters my mother had submitted. Then Exhibit C, bank records tracing the trust funds through 3 accounts before landing in the Sunrise and Bloom operating account. Then Exhibit D, the default notice from Coastal Ridge Capital Group with my forged signature on the personal guarantee. The judge looked at my mother's lawyer with an expression I will remember for the rest of my life. It was not anger. It was something worse than anger. It was the face of someone who has seen this before and is tired of seeing it. "Counsel," he said, "I'm going to need you to explain to me how a pattern of 17 documented financial transactions spanning 8 months across 3 accounts constitutes an implied authorization." The lawyer had no answer. The judgment came in 2 parts. First, the personal guarantee was declared void and unenforceable as a product of documented fraud. My name was to be removed from the Coastal Ridge loan immediately. My credit reports were to be corrected within 30 days, with a letter of explanation issued to all 3 bureaus. My teaching license was never in actual jeopardy, but the threat of it had been real enough that the judge included a specific note in the record clearing my professional standing. Second, my mother and sister were found jointly liable for the fraudulent use of the trust funds. They were ordered to repay the $60,000 principal to me with interest on a court-enforced schedule. The family home, which I later learned had a second mortgage on it that I had not known about, taken in my mother's name alone, another debt I had nearly been tethered to, was to be assessed for asset liquidation if payment was not made within 90 days. I watched my mother's face when the second part was read. The mask didn't crack all at once. It came apart the way old plaster does, in slow sections, each one revealing something rawer and less finished underneath. She had spent so many years being the story's narrator. She didn't know how to exist as a character in someone else's account of it. My sister cried. Genuinely, I think, this time. Not for the money, but because she finally understood that the safety net had not just been pulled away, it had never existed in the way she'd believed. Someone had told her it was there, and she had believed it, and now there was nothing between her and the ground. That's a terrible thing to discover at 30 years old. I know something about it. Outside the courthouse, my father was waiting on the steps. He had not been allowed in the hearing, but he had been there. He'd been there since 8 in the morning, Patricia told me later. He didn't say much. He handed me a card, an actual card, the paper kind, and a small envelope. He said he'd be in Portland through the summer and that if I wanted to have coffee sometime, the option was there, and if I didn't, he understood. I put the card in my coat pocket. That night, my cousin came over and we ordered pizza and watched the kind of movie neither of us would ever admit to watching, the sort with a predictable ending and a lot of dogs. And at some point, I realized I'd laughed 3 times in the past hour, and that felt like something worth noticing. Later, after she left, I sat at my kitchen table with the legal pad I had filled out weeks ago. The 3 pages of payments and bailouts and emergencies. I looked at it for a while. Then I turned the pages over and started writing on the blank sides. Not a list this time. Something else. Something about what comes after you stop funding someone else's version of your life. About what it feels like to want something for yourself and not immediately wonder if it's selfish. About the strange, quiet project of figuring out who you are when you're not being someone's solution. I don't have tidy answers. I'm still figuring it out, but I have my name back, on paper and otherwise. And I have a key, not a literal one, not like the movies, but something equally real. The knowledge that the story my mother told about our family was hers, not mine. She was the author of it for a very long time. She isn't anymore. I opened my laptop and started clearing out the folder I'd been keeping. The scanned documents, the saved emails, the screenshots, all of it. I held down the delete key and I watched them go, one by one, until the folder was empty. Then I opened a new document. And I started writing my own. I think about the legal pad a lot. The 3 pages I filled at midnight, listing every payment I'd ever made to people who called it love. I didn't throw those pages away. I turned them over and wrote on the blank sides. That detail matters to me more than I expected it to. It was the same paper, just a different direction. What I've come to understand is that what happened to me wasn't random and it wasn't inevitable. It was the logical conclusion of a long series of choices, theirs and mine. My mother didn't forge my signature because she was evil in some abstract way. She did it because for years, every time she reached, I gave. Every time she pushed, I absorbed it. Every time she needed something covered, I covered it. I had trained her without meaning to believe that my name, my credit, my resources were available on demand. That's not a comfortable thing to admit. But it's true. The system only kept running because I kept funding it. What stopped it wasn't anger. Anger had been there for years, quiet and useless. What stopped it was something closer to clarity. The kind that arrives at midnight when you're reading a default notice for $215,000 and you finally stop trying to find an explanation that makes the people you love look innocent. That clarity is hard to come by. It requires a specific kind of honesty that most of us resist for as long as we possibly can. I resisted it for over a decade. Patricia used to say that the strongest cases are built on documentation, not emotion. She was talking about law, but I think she was also, without knowing it, describing something true about how you survive a family like mine. You have to get very clear, very precise, very factual about what actually happened versus the story you were told. My mother was a gifted narrator. She had been telling the story of our family for so long in so many rooms to so many people that I had absorbed her version as the only version. My father was gone. I was the capable one. My sister needed more. These were just facts. Except they weren't. They were editorial choices. And the moment I started looking at the actual documents, the trust paperwork, the bank records, the forensic report, her version collapsed under the weight of its own specificity. That's the thing about the truth. It's very detailed. Lies have to stay vague to survive. My father spent 2 years quietly gathering evidence before I even knew he existed in the same city. He didn't have to do that. He could have stayed in the background, let things unfold without him, protected himself from whatever my mother might say if he got involved. Instead, he built a file. He tracked transfers. He saved documents. He showed up, not loudly, not dramatically, just steadily, in the way that actually costs something. I'm not ready to call him a good father, but I think he was trying, in the only way left available to him, to be a decent person. That counts for something. What I know now, standing on the other side of all of it, is that the things that saved me weren't the dramatic moments. They weren't the hearing or the judgment or my mother's face when the ruling came down. What saved me was the decision to stop explaining away what I already knew, to call my cousin, to find Patricia, to walk into a conference room and sit across from a stranger who turned out to be my father, and listen to what he had to say. Each of those choices was small on its own. Together they were everything. You don't rebuild a life in a courtroom. You rebuild it in the small decisions that come before. The ones where you choose to trust what you actually see over the story someone else is telling you about what you're seeing. That's not a talent, it's a practice. And it's available to anyone willing to do the uncomfortable work of being honest about where they are. I'm still learning how.